Welcome to Happy Path Programming. I'm Bruce Eckel.
I'm James Ward.
Okay, so let's start out with this calendar thing that I have. So this is from the Cooper Review, which I think is Sarah Cooper, who's a comedian. She has this daily calendar, and it's been forever since I had, one of those peel-off daily calendars. But
because who uses those?
But hers was so good, I had to get it. And so this was from January 12th. Her tricks to appear smart in meetings. And so this one is, ask, will this scale no matter what it is? No one even really knows what this means, but it's a good catch-all question that drives everyone nuts and definitely makes you look smart. But will it scale?
So is the whole calendar tricks to appear smart
the whole
in
calendar
meetings?
is tricks to appear smart in
meetings.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably a bunch of things. This is very Dilbert-esque, because they do things like, they throw things out there that, and it's, it throws you off topic, but it's hard to argue that it's important.
That's right.
It's like, how do you say doesn't matter? There's a bunch of questions that you can say.
Scaling seems really important. So that was inspired by, you have been thinking about, kind of management, which has been just a ongoing topic of exploration for you. But one thing that I've experienced a lot in management, whenever you question how management is done, how businesses are organized and all that, very often the question is my feedback into how management works. Very often the response is, but will that scale? It's pretty common. That's Windows telling me that my firewall is off.
Oh, that's very, kind of
adventurous.
Yes.
But will it scale?
Well, I hadn't thought about that, and now I'm not thinking about the main thing. But now we've diverted ourselves from trying to solve the problem, and
So it's interesting to me how I've actually experienced this will this scale a number of times, and you're right that it's something that is you can't then respond to the will it scale question and be like, does it matter? Does it need to scale? Is that important? Because of course it's important.
Yeah. What if this thing becomes successful and suddenly and we've had that. I mean, that used to be like if you wanted to launch an app, you had to create your own server farm. And so scaling was the whole thing. And now we have the cloud, and you could say the whole point of the cloud is so that you can answer that question. It's not a problem. Yeah. Yes. The answer is yes, it will scale because we're doing it in the cloud. And we can just add more. That's true. It's your technology has to be cloud oriented in order to make it scale.
I think one thing that I don't know if we've ever discussed on the podcast, but definitely a topic that you and I have a lot is the idea of phase changes. How sometimes there are things that work at a certain size that don't work at another size, that don't work at another size. And this is true for organizational things, communication related things, but also certainly systems. And so I've definitely been in the place where I'm building something with a given amount of needed scale in mind, and knowing that the way that I'm doing things is probably not going to work at some other level because I'm going to go through one of those phase changes. So like knowing that it won't scale, but I think that it's okay to be like, okay, this is for this scale, and this approach is for this scale, and this approach is for this scale. Like thinking that you should build something for a small departmental application with 10 users that needs to scale to hundreds of millions of users, like that just, you shouldn't need to do that.
Well, I think this is what happened with Ruby on Rails, is that it was so easy to solve the problem of putting up some kind of web system that which was great, and people could experiment very quickly with it, but they hadn't originally. I think it's better now, but it's kind of gone off my radar. I think it's gone off a lot of people's radar. It's not a
I thought you were going to say gone off the rails.
Right, yeah, very good. Yeah, and I think maybe that was when we saw a lot of, like, Twitter, I think, started with Ruby on Rails, didn't it?
Oh, maybe it did.
I think so. I mean, there were some sites that
GitHub,
have
I
since
think.
become big,
Yeah.
and then there was this there was this place where they're going, okay, we have to move away from Rails because it doesn't
Yeah.
serve our needs anymore, and move to this other thing. And that was, so a lot of people say, oh, well, Rails doesn't work. And you could argue, well, it does work. Maybe it only
Given
works
the right.
the small to the medium scale. And then, you're making enough money maybe at that time that you can hire people to make a more scalable solution and switch to that.
Yeah.
And I guess it's that
there's like a premature optimization, premature scaling that can definitely happen, where people spend so much time building out the massively scalable system when they should have probably gone to market with the easier solution, and then later when they needed scaling, then handled it. And I know that, like, that's hard for people to hear, because it's like, no, we need to be ready for that moment, because certainly it is harder to do it later. But
is it though? I mean, if you're able to very quickly change your system and experiment with it and everything, versus a scalable solution might not be that way.
Yeah.
And so if you wait until you go, oh, this thing is pretty stable, now we should switch over to the more scalable, solid, software engineered solution, you may get great benefits by that.
Well, and I guess you probably know, like, what needs to scale at that point. Mm-hmm. Whereas before you actually get there, you may not know where the bottlenecks are. So I think in a lot of ways, there's a lot of premature optimization that goes into the possible need to scale.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And not that you shouldn't always, like I build a lot of stuff reactively just by default, because I think that that's a better place to start, so that when I do need to scale, I've already at least taken that piece and alleviated that bottleneck.
Yeah, that's the conundrum, because it's like, if you just use the right system from the beginning, then you don't have those. It's so tempting. To say, well, yeah, well, I mean, it's the decision thing again. It's like, well, let's front load our decision process and put the effort in. This is what I tend to do. I go, okay, I got to do research on everything so that I know that the decision I'm making is right. And it isn't necessarily, but I feel comfortable with it because I've, like, done all the research and seen all the things. And in the end, is it, I mean, your approach of diving in and saying, well, let's take this technology and make something that works, and we don't have to understand it thoroughly. We just need to get something working. And the amount that you learn in the process of doing that is really a lot, and because you get a feel for it. And if you're gonna hit a wall, you find out by doing that. Whereas my approach is, well, I got to understand everything. Okay, now I do. Now I'm building something. Oh, I hit the wall. And now maybe all the time that I invested in understanding that thing I have a hard time saying that it's lost, because I understand a new thing now.
Yeah.
But from a productivity standpoint, I can't argue. It's really hard to argue with your approach.
Yeah. I think there's a desire from a lot of people in technology to find the, like, universal solution. And wouldn't it be nice if I could start with this thing and use it all the way up until the end of days, because it doesn't get impacted by the phase changes as needs change. but I've yet to actually see a technology that is universal, like that actually is has the traits of something that you would need to be universally useful. Um,
I came across an article this morning. I don't know where it was because I kind of dismissed it. It was talking about why object-oriented programming is the bad solution. And I thought, oh, well, maybe there's some insights here. And it started out by blaming object oriented programming for, I think, the 737 MAX plane crashes and any number of other things. It was like, yeah, the problem was object oriented programming. And I'm going, oh, this person is just going after,
yeah,
this is clickbait. This is not, there's
yeah,
no real thinking here.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I don't think that object-oriented programming is a universal solution.
Gosh, no.
Like there are places where it doesn't work.
Absolutely.
But to say that it is
the cause of all crashes and everything, and that's like, I mean, it's like, because I mean, my orientation as I've gotten more and more into the functional world is just use functions. And then if something, my experience has been that, oh, there's something that's messy and ugly and everything. And eventually I realize, oh, this thing wants to be an object. And you make it an object and it's fine. But all the rest of the things are just, I mean, they work better as functions. Just occasionally you sprinkle in some objects. And you could argue, well, is it worth all the structure that we have and the inheritance and virtual functions and things like that in order to and actually when I go back historically, I look at even when we were working on when I was on the C++ committee and we were working on that, I remember it being something that, I mean, because C++ is a functional object hybrid language. You can just program with functions or you can put objects in. And I remember that like Bjarne wanted to support objects and he saw the benefits of them. But I think the mechanism was so involved that it was easy to begin thinking like, I guess the Java designers did, that objects should be everything. And how that infects subsequent languages, this idea that, well, you have to make an object and then you can call methods on the object. And there is no idea of a standalone function in Java. And it's like that people learn that way and they have a really hard time letting go of it.
Yeah.
That's just their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It being, and then how it was absorbed by like universities. They go, oh, finally, we have your solution until the end of days. So we'll just teach Java for all 4 years of your undergraduate. And people come away with
scale.
Yes, it's the solution. It's the solution to everything. Java's the answer. Yeah. I think that's, well, there's that thing again, and I labor under it of, wouldn't it be nice if you could just make the decision and it's done, you've put all the effort in and you've made the right decision, and now you don't think about it anymore. You can go on, you can save your energy for future decisions.
Yeah.
And that would be great. So let's pretend that it's real.
That's pretend. That's right.
Because I want it to be that way.
That's
so
right.
I'll pretend. I mean, this is, you look at the entire business world and it's predicated on that. They go, oh, here's a thing. Economics is well, at least it started that way before behavioral economics was, well, wouldn't it be great if we could write equations to predict the behavior of the economy? And so
wouldn't that be great?
So let's pretend it's true.
Yeah.
And then you get all of economics, except for behavioral economics, when people started saying, hey, this isn't working. Let's see how people actually act. And then and the other economic,
they realized that the pretending
wasn't really working out. I mean, you end up with the Laffer curve.
Yeah.
You end up with trickle down economics. It's all based on this would be great. This would really fit nicely with my worldview. So let's pretend it's true, and we'll push it, and then maybe that will make it true.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that maybe works, or at least it works for a while. Of saying, let's just believe it's true.
It's
And
the fake it till you make it approach to business.
I
Just
I don't
believe.
think it's even an approach. I think it's the foundation
Just
of.
it's. I guess you can believe something for so long and so strongly that eventually it becomes true to you.
Oh, you internalize it to the point where you don't think about it. You go, well, of course. Um, I mean, Adam Smith's idea that people are lazy and they'll steal from you if you don't build a structure to prevent laziness and stealing. And then you create that structure and people go, well, screw this. I'm gonna, what do they call it? Bunk off. I think the British call it that,
Huh.
and steal office supplies, and because I don't, I feel treated badly here, and that's the thing you're most afraid of, clearly, because you built your entire structure around it,
Right.
and then it's
It
like, well,
becomes
look,
yeah.
they're doing that,
Yeah.
so it does actually become your reality.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so hard to sometimes absorb all this stuff because it's
Yeah.
disappointing. I think
It
that's
is.
the thing. It's
Yeah, we have
super
attachments to these things. It's like I have an attachment to reactive as being a better way to program, even though it does make things harder. But I am going to do everything reactively, and I'm going to internally just like hate myself if I have to do something in a non-reactive way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we all have attachments to things that we think are better or things that we think are real.
Or at least that you're comfortable with. That might be the thing. Because if somebody comes along and presents you a better way, I think you would look at it, but you might wait a while before saying, oh, yeah, this really is, this has benefits. Well, you'd wait for evidence.
Yeah.
You'd wait for, and I mean, there's certainly other things that, one could look at and see are beneficial, but go, yeah, but is it beneficial enough? I don't know. The metric I usually say is to make an easy decision for change, you need to see like a multiple benefit. Like ideally, if it's 10 times, you go, oh, sure. Going from C to C++, I felt like that was a 10 times benefit from that. And assembly to C for sure.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so, all of these different benefits. And I think Java to Kotlin is probably that.
Yeah.
You could just see.
I had to write some Java recently.
It
was painful after spending so much time lately in Kotlin.
Yeah. Well, I'm working on something for the Java 8 book, and it's, I don't know, I'm sort of at peace with it, mostly because, this is a relatively small thing and I can just treat it as an intellectual exercise. Whereas, railing against the semicolons and the verbosity and all this kind of stuff it's kind of pointless. It's like Java is what it is. And there's a lot of people using it and they're comfortable with it. And man, when I think the last time I was I don't remember where I was somewhere in Europe speaking, and I was talking about Kotlin, and it was a predominantly Java conference. And people were kind of rattled when I said, okay, I think this is going to be the next big thing. They didn't want to hear that. They wanted to hear Java is going to be forever the greatest thing in the world. And
attachments to our teddy bears that give us comfort.
Well, and I like one person in particular who I'd known in past years who lives in Prague, I think. And he was going, well, I like Java and I'm comfortable with it, and I don't want to see it change because, and you think, well, here's things in your life, like, and we have all of these other things now, it's not just Java, it's version control, it's build systems, it's, all the extra things which are important, and then you go in and start trying to pull the rug out from under Java, and somebody's going to be hanging on to their teddy bear in that case. And
that's fine if if that's what they need.
Yeah, that's right. What works, and it's like a company. I was reading an article where this guy was making a case for I guess when he started with this company and they were just dipping their toes into Kotlin, they were worried that they would be able to hire programmers who would be able to do it. And he said, now it's, I don't know what, 5 years later. And now it's more, do we get programmers? Because we're maybe appealing to people who've been programming in Java and want something more. And if we just were to stick with Java, we might have a hard time hiring programmers. And he also said that he had found that the coming up to speed curve was a lot less than people expected. And then that makes sense because so much of it is the Java ecosystem. It's almost like the transition from C to C++. There's a lot of it that is pretty familiar. I mean, the syntax is different, but at least in my perception, every difference in syntax is a benefit.
Yeah.
So
I remember going through this with the Scala community where when I was at TypeSafe, a lot of people would ask, how do I hire Scala developers? And because they wanted to adopt Scala, but were worried about finding Scala developers. And at that time, there was very few Scala developers out there looking for jobs. And so the recommendation was hire great Java developers and teach them Scala. And that worked really well for a lot of people. So I think now probably Kotlin is in that same boat.
But I think the barrier is a lot lower.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
I mean, Scala has so many things that
Yeah.
are not.
Yeah. Oh, the learning curve.
Yeah, the learning curve.
For Scala than for Kotlin.
Yeah, and
but either way, you can start as a Java developer and
sure,
and go to Kotlin
and
Scala
it's kind
because
of
the ecosystem.
It's a good filter too, because you're going to get people who go, yes, I'm interested in learning Scala, versus people who go, no, I just want another Java job. And you want the ones who want to learn the new thing. Yeah.
So we were talking at coffee this morning about hiring, and
yes,
it was interesting to think about hiring people is fitting with that same thing of, we do all this interview process because we believe that it's effective and works. We are going to pretend that it is
against evidence, against mountains of evidence.
Yep. Yeah. And I think like reviews, OKRs, like a lot of that stuff is the same.
What OKRs?
I forget what it stands for. It's like the way that you state what you're going to do in a given like quarter or year or whatever.
And how do you know that?
There's a way that you put that. Oh, how do you know what?
How do you know what you're going to do in a quarter?
Well, management needs to know, and so.
And why do they need to know?
Because will it scale?
And so they can plan.
That's right.
So they can plan.
Yeah.
And
control, the illusion of control.
The illusion of control. Yeah.
Okay. So hiring, whether it's hiring or review systems or whatever, I think we organizationally have a lot of illusions of control, a lot of beliefs that these systems work. And like you said, like with evidence that tells us that they basically don't.
Oh yeah, I think there's one. I thought I came across something, this was years ago, that kind of declared that interviewing is probably the worst way that you could hire somebody. But then people go, well, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that I've been studying basically says, I mean, the foundation is kind of that you have to give up the illusion of control, because you don't have control and you have to give that up. But all of the business school stuff and everything is selling you the illusion of control. Huh. I mean, I think a lot of people in the business schools know that that's not true, but it's kind of like, well, it's sort of like interviewing. Well, what else would we do in business schools? Well, this is what we sell. So if you take away that illusion of control, then how can we stay in business? Well, a lot of business schools are going out of business because people don't really believe in them anymore. Because so many of the decisions that are made are business school decisions and they don't work.
Yeah. I guess the whole MBA program thing is really just giving you a worldview that you can control everything. That these are the knobs, and here's how to turn them, and here's what turning them will do, and here's how to, just have a whole hierarchy of
They're levers.
control. Yeah.
Well, and the honest business schools will say, well, yeah, what you're really getting is the networking. They're not admitting that they're teaching you, what's the word? Bullshit. Can we say bullshit?
Sure.
Okay.
We can say anything we want.
Well, we can say anything we want, but I don't want to
offend anyone.
Yeah, I don't want to offend people. It's not helpful, but I mean that they know that they're doing it, and so what they do is they try and cast the spotlight on the good things, which is the networking. But if that's true, then why not just design? I mean, it's kind of like what we do with the Winter Tech Forum.
Yeah,
it's like, well, I mean, we don't use the term networking, but it's really more about
relationship building.
Relation. I mean, I don't even want to say that
it's not the goal. But
I feel skeezy saying that. Oh yeah, we're here to because anytime people, you have networking events or whatever, and you're supposed to go around and give.
What is the goal of the Winter Tech Forum?
I guess loosely, it's just.
Does it need to have a goal?
Well, no, I don't think it needs to. But I mean, really, we're getting together with other people who like technology and we're talking about that. But that's not what happens. What happens is actual person-to-person, legitimate person-to-person connection.
Yeah.
We make, because like you've been there at times when people, like at the end of the week, people get really emotional about having to go back to their regular world because we've created this, I don't know, I guess I would call
where
it,
people feel connected and valued. And
okay, here's the thing, because I've been to Burning Man 4 times. I would call it a mini Burning Man for technologists.
Yeah.
It's as close, which is what do they say the goal of Burning Man is? Radical
creative expression,
something like that. Radical creative expression. And I feel like, that's maybe, without giving it a lot more thought, I would say, well, that's what happens.
That's what happens.
It's almost like behavioral economics. Rather than saying, oh, here's our goal, here's our mission statement or whatever.
Say, here's what happens.
We get together, we remove as many constraints as we possibly, we only leave the constraints on that help the process and not the ones that are trying to control it.
It's interesting that my brain, and this is probably cultural and whatever, but my brain goes to like, what are the goals? When it's a totally different way to look at something, not as goals, but as what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And goals are maybe also a way to have an illusion of control. Because if I state my goal, then I can like have an illusion that then I can do things to get towards that goal. Absolutely. Whereas, in the case of the Winter Tech Forum, maybe it's the wrong way to look at it as having a goal. Maybe, like you said, it's just, let's state what happens. And what happens is connection, artistic expression. People feel valued. People work on things that are interesting to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And notice that, we remove all attempts at a goal. Like, because when you create, like during the hack day, I mean, in my opinion, the more fanciful and pointless, the better. It's like the ones that we remember most are the ones that are just silly, and yet they're doing, like I still remember the one that who's the guy from Sweden or Norway or whatever did, where he had created something where he could hold this red flag up in front of the camera and his slide bullet points would be projected on it, and then when he wanted to change slides, he would just shake. He would just shake the piece, and it's like, that is ridiculous, and it was awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
it's stuck in my mind. There was a bunch of things
It's
that
true. We have done some really quirky, just silly things.
totally frivolous,
The
and they're
the
great.
the IoT shot dispenser. It was like a
That's
whiskey
right.
shot dispenser. I didn't work on that one.
Oh,
But
you didn't?
I provided some of the IoT gear, but
Okay.
the one that sticks in my mind, it was super fun for me. This is back in the Flex days. Was the Flex had a library for QR code detection, and so I hooked up a scroll bar to a QR code, and I was able to like scroll the page by like moving the QR code. But I think for some reason during the demo, I couldn't use my hands, or they were occupied, I don't know, typing or something. So I put the QR code on my forehead and then was like nodding my head up and down to scroll the page. I remember that was fun.
I know. And it's like I love it when you're backed into a corner and you have to come up with a solution that you wouldn't do, but out of desperation, you go, I'll just stick it on my forehead because it works. And then you start thinking about that and you go, what else could we do now that we've broken that barrier of ridiculousness? What could we do that takes it and makes it useful? Yeah.
We've done a lot of ridiculous projects.
We have,
the
and they're just fun. You know, they're just, nobody's going, does this scale, or does this, is this productizable, or any of those things. They're just going, that's cool. And that's the only metric that we care about is this interesting.
It's funny. The not memorable ones were the ones that I had a goal, like, I don't, they're hard to remember because something that wasn't something fun. It was something like, all right, I got to get to here. Mm-hmm. Those are the hack projects that I just don't even remember because,
because you had a goal.
Didn't inspire.
Yeah, you don't have the freedom of taking the other path. When you reach a point, you go, oh, it looks interesting down. Oh, I have this goal I have to get to. Yeah, that's well. And I remember when we did the hackathon, what the theme of the conference was, which is kind of a goal. But fortunately, we go, this is just our theme in case anybody asks. But we don't. Nobody has to do anything about this. Don't worry about this. But we were doing machine learning, and I have to say that like broke my brain open about so many things. The thing is, I realized I hadn't really understood science, even though I studied physics as an undergraduate. And I can go back to that and go, oh, here's why physics didn't make sense. This is why all the equations and everything didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand them from like the machine learning standpoint. And once we did like some little simple thing, I don't know if it was predicting coin flips or something using machine learning. I don't even remember what it was. And we didn't, we barely got something working, and I don't think it worked well. But the process just made me realize, oh, we're building a model here, and it's a model that's more complicated than what we can do in physics because we have to have everything in our equations. And I mean, it just released me from so many preconceptions that I had about everything.
Speaking of physics, I was listening to an NPR show recently. I think it was maybe On Being, and Krista Tippett was interviewing a physicist who won the physics Nobel Prize, whatever, recently, and he was talking about how in his approach to physics, he likes to find the beautiful, elegant solutions, and for him, he was saying that like dark matter has long been a challenge to him because dark matter is not the like elegant, beautiful solution.
It's messy.
Yeah. And so so one of his driving things is like, okay, there's gotta be a more beautiful, elegant, and not meaning universal, because that's something that a lot of, and maybe back to our previous topic about finding universal solutions in physics, that's definitely like haunted a lot of people. Like, oh, there's got to be some universal thing here, and we've never really found the universals.
And why does there have to be that? I mean, why?
Right.
Seriously,
ask yourself. So he made sure to like say that beautiful and elegant doesn't mean universal.
Hmm.
Because I think there is definitely some people think that those are the same.
Well,
But
the unified field theory that people have always chased,
yeah,
oh, it's got to be there, it's got to be there. And then, like, when you dig into quantum mechanics, and it's like, oh, well, this thing happens, so we just made up a particle for it. It seems really ad hoc. It
yeah,
just seems like, wow, so you're just making stuff up to make your equation work.
yeah.
And then when you look at machine learning, you go, that's exactly
That's
what we're
exactly what it's
doing.
doing.
That's what we've always been doing. All we
Machine learning
care
is just
about
making
is
up particles to make something the equation work.
the equation work. Is it, can we predict it?
Yeah,
Does it fit the data, and does it create predictability?
yeah,
And if it does, then your equation works. But it's very pragmatic. It isn't seeking some sort of elegance. And yeah, I mean, like when you create a software design, I mean, I want it. I love elegance.
yeah. Oh, me
I,
too.
I really want a design, but I'm having to explain it to people. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going, there are times when maybe that's not. I mean, for the longest time before Python had optional static typing, um, it was like, it works. I get things done fast. I solve my
Mm.
problems quickly. I don't know if they scale, but they get my problem done. And it's like, that puts a hole in the whole. Is this elegant?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think elegance is something that we balance against other needs. Um, Obviously, it has to work,
mhm.
but there are a lot of times where
Or you
I get
just have to believe it works. Maybe it doesn't actually have to work. Maybe you just have to believe you're doing the right thing.
I've seen a lot of software that people believe works that certainly does not.
Mm.
Um, just this week, I was touching like 5 different pieces of technology all at the same time, and all of them were broken. I'm just like, like this is so. Sir, it's not like business and management. Software actually should work, I believe.
Yeah, I mean,
Um, but it should also be written elegantly and architected elegantly.
so people can understand it if they need to make it change.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe it is about understanding. Maybe that is the in the world of software. That's the reason for the desire for elegance is the
Well, and
understandability.
there's also this thing that I've talked about for years, which I call the vector of change, which is, I mean, like, why do you design a piece of software a particular way? Is because you expect it to change in a particular direction.
Mm,
And so you'll say, oh, we're going to add more pets to our system, so we need a base class pet. We derive everything from pets. Now when we add a new pet, everything's easy. I mean, polymorphism in general is that.
yeah,
It's like, okay, you want to be able to use pet everywhere and not worry about the specific pet. So that's your vector of change. But what if you don't? Then you've designed your whole system around that. And so there's that illusion of control thing again. You
yeah.
go, oh, I know how this is going to change in the future. And then your customer comes along, or your stakeholder comes along and
Or
says,
COVID comes along.
COVID comes along, something in the world comes along, and it doesn't fit the way you've designed things.
Yeah,
And now suddenly your system is hacky
yeah,
because you're going in and you're making a change over here, and it doesn't fit the way you
yeah.
assumed. And I think when they were initially talking about, because before we had Agile, we had extreme programming, XP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And that was their whole thing was, you know, you're you want to be able to make changes. You don't want to be putting all of your effort in the beginning, and then later, assuming that, okay, the curve is steep here and then it flattens out. You want to be able to make changes relatively effortlessly anywhere along that curve, because
yeah,
that's what you're going to do. It's going to happen. You
yeah.
can't predict the
If you
future.
want a consistent cost to those changes versus with the waterfall model, the cost just increases.
You have to do it. You have to make all the decisions up front.
Yeah, that's right.
There's that
Yeah,
thing again,
yeah,
that belief and the belief that you can figure everything out front is so intrinsic. And I think we all carry that with us. And don't question it. Because if you were to say, I mean, even when because I suggested this idea to somebody else about hiring, which is, what if you just, you looked at your candidates and you drew a name out of a hat rather than doing any kind of interviewing? And this person's response was, well, I mean, there must be some things that you can do up front, like, and you start thinking about it and you go, well, yeah, I mean, like a basic programming test, that would make sense, right? But if you really think about it, well, what if there's a person who's an awesome programmer, but just tests freak them out?
Yeah.
You're going to lose that. You're going to lose possibly the best person in your whole pool, because you go, I mean, we could predict that at least.
What you're saying feels very scary because
Yes.
I can't control it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You mean you're just casting this whole thing to chance? And I'm saying, yeah.
You already are casting all the chance you just aren't aware of.
Or worse than that, you're believed that you aren't. Yeah. So there's a book that I've started reading about decision making, and it points out that, I mean, they actually have an exercise, and they say, think back on, a decision that you made, and how did you judge the quality of the validity of that decision? You base it on outcome, and you hear that and you go, well, sure, of course you do. But this says, well, what you're not taking into account is chance or luck or all of these random external factors that affect it. So you can make that decision, those factors that you're ignoring affect the outcome, and you go, that was a good decision. And then you, over here in alternate space, you make exactly the same decision. The factors push it in another direction. You go, oh, that was a bad decision. So it's like disconnected. Your decision criteria are disconnected from the outcome.
But due to some cognitive bias, we believe that we can ignore those external factors.
Well, because we can't control them.
That's right.
So let's pretend they don't exist.
Let's pretend they don't exist and don't have any impact. But I remember you telling me a while ago about some business podcast you'd listened to a number of times. I don't know if it was Harvard Business Review or something, but there's a podcast where they would get a founder of some successful company on, like, every episode. And every episode, like, the founder would say, here's the secret. Like, I figured it out. Here's the reason why we were successful. And they're totally ignoring all of the probably way more influential factors that actually led to their success. But they were all able to have the one thing that they could control that made them successful.
It's the Stanford.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's like Stanford, which
it was like the Stanford startup.
Something like that. They have a podcast and they invite. So what happens is they have all of the Stanford students who can come to this thing, and because they're Stanford, they can pull, really top end people. And so you're hearing people who are clearly successful, and they come in and they explain their success, and then you listen to the next one, and the criteria for how to do this is completely different. And they never commented on it. But I feel like they were smart enough to realize that the students are going to pick up on this. It's like, oh, wait a minute, that guy said this, you're saying the opposite. I wonder what that means.
Right.
Yeah, maybe nobody knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But they want to come. I mean, the whole deal of being a CEO or whatever is to give confidence to the shareholders and the investors.
Yeah.
And I'm
in control, and I made the right decision, and therefore we were successful.
Right. And it's this whole shell game of believability that you're, and the thing is, this is built in to the whole business management delusion world. And it's really frustrating because this is a cultural, this is a really tough ingrained belief system to start to try and take apart.
Well, it seems like there's cognitive biases and what do they call it when we have something that evolutionarily is a trait in our brain that causes us to act in certain ways. I forget what the terminology is for that,
but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So there's definitely, I'm sure culture and all that stuff just makes it so we're unaware of why we've done these things and why we have these beliefs.
It becomes the air, the water,
Yeah.
that this is water.
Yeah.
If you've never heard that, you have heard
Yeah.
that thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, what's he talking about? Water.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so built in that nobody questions it. Everybody's basing what they're doing on, okay, we all understand that we can control the world, right? And how do you go in and say, let's pretend we can't control the world? And even if you do that in a little place, that's so when the French Revolution happened, all of the surrounding countries were like super threatened by that, and they started putting armies together to go back and reestablish a monarchy in France.
Huh.
And or you look at socialism, when that started happening. All of the capitalist countries say, oh, this is an existential threat to capitalism, so we have to do whatever we can. The Cold War was really our doing, not the Soviets. Yeah, and because it's so deeply threatening. And so what I'm suggesting here is to say, well, what if we look at this, all of these things, what if we take that away, this idea that we can control things? I mean, even thinking about it myself, I go, well, what would life look like? That sounds, as you say, very scary, because my world is built on this idea of determinism, and that if I pull these levers and set these things the right way, the outcome will be certain. And science,
the illusion is very comfortable.
The illusion is comfortable, and the whole point of science is to find those places where you can adjust the levers. So to say, yes, science is real, but also so is all the random effects, and you can't be, there are things that science won't work with. In fact, science is kind of a little, it's intentionally isolated to things that are predictable.
Right.
But you say
in places where you can have controls.
Yes, well, right.
And I see the desire for scientific management, but it turns out in the real world of business and people and communication and these really complex structures, having the ability to have an actual controlled experiment in business, I've never seen it actually be effective.
So when I was at Irvine studying physics after I'd left Pomona College for reasons, one of the classes I had to take was statistical mechanics. And in statistical mechanics, you go, okay, well, we got all these molecules and they're bouncing against each other. And it's all random and you can't deal with it on that level. But there's this general trend that you can go, oh, well, there's this, there's lower pressure over here and higher pressure over here. And so as the molecules bump against each other, they have this kind of trend towards moving to the lower pressure area. And it's a whole different way of looking at things. But if you're wanting to say, oh no, we can predict everything, you're going to be in trouble. And I think that kind of thing might work here, where we say, well, if you have it might even be pressure. Say, okay, so you have a lower pressure. Over here, we have an area where people are trying to control things, and they've got, deadlines and, certain expectations that have to be met and all of these issues. And that's a higher pressure area. And then you have this lower pressure area where you say, oh, well, we can't control that. We can't control the little individual interactions between the molecules, but we can create an environment where creativity is more likely to happen and productivity is more likely to happen. And I think the molecules are going to migrate in that direction. I think they already are, slowly and If you're focused on the individual, micromanaging the individual interactions, which even then, those are just molecules bouncing against each other, and so you're standing there going, I'm controlling this interaction.
Yeah.
Eventually you're going to wake up and go, wow, where did all the molecules go? They're over there in that lower pressure area.
So you're advocating for thermodynamic management.
Yes, you heard it here first, folks. Thermodynamic management, or statistical mechanics management, or something like that, where you're seeing the big picture, which is, we can't control those interactions, but we can create an environment where interactions are more likely. I mean, and people have tried to do that. Like when I visited GitHub before, this was a couple of years before it had been acquired by Microsoft. They had just built their new building, and that's what they were trying to do. Mm-hmm. They were trying to solve that problem. The problem of, how do we just create this creative space,
molecules to do what they want,
molecules to do what they're going to do anyway.
Yeah.
But the micromanagement is kind of like, oh no, this collision's going to happen. I got to get in between and prevent it from happening. And and it's like, well, it doesn't seem to work.
Yeah.
So they were doing that, and they were also trying to, logically, because they were all about remote. They were saying, how do we make the remote worker as important as the person in the room?
Yeah.
Which maybe you can't. I mean, maybe
GitHub and Heroku have certainly done a really good job of that, but it was an intention.
Sure, it was an intention. And maybe one of the things that, that maybe that's another illusion of control. Maybe you need to look at it and go, because we're humans and we react to a person who's in the room with us, that level is not possible. We have to accept that, but we can do something else once we accept it. Yeah. As long as we're trying to control it, we're not accepting it. We're not accepting the world the way it is.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, you go, all right, well, maybe we need to push the envelope, or we need to provide something else in addition for the remote person, or I don't know, somehow change it in that direction to try and help their interactions be better.
Yeah. I remember one thing. I went to the GitHub office, that new one, shortly after they built it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think I interviewed with them or something.
Oh yeah.
I think that's the reason why I went there. But I remember one of the things that they said they do is anytime a conversation starts to happen in person, someone would usually remember, oh, we need to take this online. And so to avoid the water cooler conversations being location specific,
right,
they would always, as soon as a water cooler conversation spun up, they would take it into a Slack room or something like that so that others could be part of that water cooler conversation as well, who weren't physically there. And I thought that the cultural acknowledgement and reinforcement of that was a really good thing for their culture. And
I like the attempt. Yes, I remember now that you said that they said that they tried to do that. And I like the attempt, but there's something in me that goes, okay, I mean, I have ideas that are in the moment. And if I have to stop and go, all right, let's set up a Slack room for this, I mean, it kind of evaporates the spontaneity of it. And I
wonder if they developed ways to help with that. Like if you're the one that's feeling inspired and has something, maybe someone else can be like the translator of that into a Slack room, or be the narrator into a Slack room or something. I wonder if they developed ways to deal with that, or if maybe they just decided it wasn't working and they don't have that particular cultural element anymore. It'd be interesting to know.
Yeah. I mean, that's a reasonable first cut. Right. But then to be able to see all of the issues around it, rather than go, we've made this decision, here's our solution. And this is, this kind of comes back to that. When I took the Holacracy training, that was really what I came away from it with, was if you do this heavy front-loaded decision, you don't want to revisit that. And
Oh, I've
again,
heard that in a lot of times. Like, we decided this.
sure,
We spent a lot of time
yes,
making this decision, and so we're not going to revisit it.
it's the right decision. Well,
Yeah.
it's like the plastic bag ban here in Crested Butte, and it's like there's a lot of data that shows that banning plastic bags is actually worse in a whole bunch of ways. But I sent this data to several of the people on the town council, and that was the response. It was just like, oh yeah, but we did this, so what are you going to do?
Right.
We can't just go back and change it again. I mean,
They should have done smaller experiments.
right, smaller experiments, do feedback. Well, and the problem is that it looks good on the local level, but they're not seeing the bigger picture. And the person who suggested it initially just saw some YouTube videos and go, oh, plastic is bad, so we'll ban it and that will fix things. And that and that sort of belief that I think that comes into play again, that belief that, oh yeah, we're controlling all of the factors.
That's right.
And there's always all of these other factors that you can't see until you try it. And if you commit, then you're stuck.
Yeah.
And so what the holacracy thing was doing was, it was say, okay, we have an issue here. Let's hear suggestions to fix it. Okay, let's look at this one. Yeah, that sounds good. Are there any things that we know would be bad to do this? Now, we don't know if it's going to work, but if somebody has had experience doing this and they know it's absolutely not going to work, then let's choose something else. So it's a lightweight process. And then later, if there's another problem with it that develops because we chose that, we'll bring it up again. Yeah. And so this ability to bring things up again, and not that, oh, well, we made the heavyweight decision.
XP agile version of decision making.
Kind of. Yeah, kind of. But except that I think XP and Agile were trying to deal with a communication issue first and foremost. Yeah. At least that's what they declared. Yeah. Did I ever tell you I got invited to the original
I remember
Agile meeting? Yeah, I told you that. And then just like, what, you're not paying my way? No, I'm not going to go.
Well, you'd be much better equipped to attend that meeting today.
Oh, and the mindset has changed. Yeah. I mean, I used to be much more narrow on these things, but now I absolutely would be easily talked into something like that. That sounds really interesting. And especially even the fact that, it's not a conference. It's not the fact that I wasn't getting paid for it would actually be a plus.
Yeah.
So, for sure.
Maybe we should develop, like the Agile Manifesto, but our Thermodynamic Management Manifesto.
Need to have a cooler name. Oh,
yeah, definitely.
It needs to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to understand our audience here.
We live in a post-agile world.
Post-agile, yes.
That's when you can't think of a good name, you just put post on whatever something. You're replacing.
Yeah. I mean, and I think understanding your audience and what they're able to do. And this is why I think C++ and Java were successful, is because we're providing a migration path, and Kotlin too. Mm-hmm. We're providing a migration path for this audience to allow them to adapt to it. And because, I mean, this is even bigger when we say, okay, premise one, you can't control anything. I was like, what? That's going to be a lot of, that's a hard struggle. And in fact, tough. I think it would have to be done. The idea I've found, because I've taken a lot of workshops and all kinds of things, and I found the most effective ones that have the greatest impact on my preconceived notions is where nobody starts by saying, oh, here, I'll explain to you why your preconceived notions are wrong, etc. It's like you do an exercise and then it pulls the rug out from under you somehow in a way that you can't deny. One of the most effective ones was Gerald Weinberg, who's unfortunately dead for a year and a half or so. Didn't even know it happened till somebody explained it to me. And I took one of his workshops, which weirdly, because he used to actually spend summers up here in Crested Butte. That was another weird Crested Butte Nexus thing.
Wow.
And so he would have these workshops, which were called, I don't remember what they were called, but this basic one of the biggest parts of it was that you would do this exercise where you created a company, and the company was doing something silly, like I think you had Scrabble letters, and you would mine there were rules, so you had to mine the letters, and then you'd make words, and then the words would be turned into poems, and that was your product to sell. And you would organize however you wanted to organize, and people naturally fell into sort of high. So we'll have the miners down here, and we'll have the marketing people and the people who create the poems, and then we have management, of course, who controls all these things. And the speed, because this was like a 1 day at most exercise, and the speed at which people reproduced the structures that they knew and that those things went off the rails was phenomenal. Because like we had, I think in one of the groups, we had somebody who just, burst into tears and quit the company. It was so traumatizing for that person that they're going, I'm quitting. I'm not doing this anymore. And it was like deeply emotional thing for them. And then the other companies, universally, they reproduced the worst working conditions that you'd ever been in. I mean, the miners would go on strike, and all kinds of things. And to see that, it was like, that was a great way to pull the rug out from this idea that you can control things. Because all these people who were coming to this workshop were ones who they were trying to do things better. They had researched, they had, gone to school about this and everything. They had the answers that were given to them, and they were applying those, and they weren't working. And I think everybody came away from that, which is, what the heck just happened? I mean, that thing haunted me for years. I mean, it kind of still does. It's like you go back and you just go, I don't know what happened. You
saw your illusion of control. And
I didn't even understand that that's what it was. It took me this long to go, oh, I think that's what was going on. We all had, everybody was coming to this workshop to be taught, how do you manage better? And management is the idea that, well, we're controlling these things to somehow make the company better, whatever that means. And none of it worked, and it failed super fast. Like you couldn't go, oh, well, if you just give it time, it's because it just went right there. And everybody was unhappy about being in this company. It all sucked. It was terrible. And so you come away from that, and that is exactly what they were doing. And in fact, they had like coaches, not just Gerald and the coaches would go around and they would tweak things. They would throw little monkey wrenches in it to make sure that it went totally off the rails. It was brilliant. And the thing is, you couldn't come away with, it just scrambled your brain. You didn't have a grasp on anything. All you could see was, oh my gosh, this failed so badly. And then you begin to look at companies and their attempts to say, oh yeah, we have all these MBAs, they know what they're doing, and they're having this new management thing that there are books that talk about how you bring new management structures and how you introduce them into the companies, and it's
in a very controlled way.
In a way so that it disrupts things. But now we have the new management system, which will work. My first experience when I was working at Fluke, the founder had died and his son had gone to Harvard Business School. And I think we went through, it was like almost every 6 months, we had a new business structure system or whatever. Oh, that didn't, I guess now, to their credit, they kept trying new things. That's one thing, but they kept expecting them to work.
Control things in the way you want.
Control again.
Control again.
Control again. Yeah. So really, and even now, there's so many things in my life that I still have this unconscious belief that I'm able to control things. even though every experiment I try, the better way is to try and, well, let go of that idea of control and see what happens. I mean, again, like when you stuck the thing on your forehead, it's like, because you were out of control.
Yeah.
You go, I can't deal with this. I'll just do, what can I do? Oh, I'll just stick it on my forehead.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're creative. So creativity comes when you give up that illusion of control.
Yeah.
And outcome and schedule and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So, but to go back, to circle back to the idea of hiring, this idea that let's just take the people who are interested in it, draw their names out of a hat, and then have a feedback system. Oh, but can't we do some stuff up front? You know, we there's still some control we can have. I mean, there's obviously some things you can do. And if you really think about it, you go, no, those things all have serious failings that mean that we are excluding people who may be the best possible person for that job.
Yeah. But will it scale?
Actually, I mean, the way, as I'm thinking about this, because I'm thinking about the area under the curve as being all the effort that you put into this, I'm thinking that we may actually, I mean, think about it. If you go, okay, we're not going to do the interview process or anything, we're just going to draw a name out of a hat. Wow, how much energy have you just recovered from that process that doesn't work? And then you have, little feedback cycles somehow. I mean, we still need to figure that out.
Yeah.
But you have these feedback cycles, and those, I think, are much less energy. And, so we end up saving a huge amount of energy by giving up that idea of control.
Control does require a lot of energy.
Because you keep, you go, oh, this isn't working. We gotta nail this down. I mean, you're playing whack-a-mole because you don't want to. The thing you don't want to let go of is the idea that you can control things, and so you go, oh, that's got to control. Whack that, whack that, whack that. And pretty soon you're whacking all of these things, but you're holding on to this idea of control. And then you think, what if I gave up that idea of control? Then I wouldn't have to whack anything. I would just go, all right, we'll just select, it's random anyway. So let's go with the randomness.
Just succumb to the randomness of the world. But
it's also, I feel like, maybe very liberating, because you go, oh, okay, I don't have to pretend that I can control everything. We'll just
be me.
We'll just do it a different way now. And I feel like maybe, well, in a sense, that's what happens at the Winter Tech Forum, is that we just go, yep, we don't have any upfront planning. We don't, and a normal conference goes, well, how will people know to come to the conference? Because if you don't have the list of speakers and what they're talking about, then they won't know if it's a good conference or not. And you go, yep, they won't, because you don't know anyway. You go to that conference. The first time I went to, there was the Go conference that Luciano wanted to go to. And we went down to it, and everything was controlled, and it was dull as dishwater.
Yeah.
And it was like, you're going, I could have just, all it was the presentations.
Yeah.
And they recorded them. I could watch them on YouTube. There was nothing happening in between it. I mean, they had a party or whatever, but those parties are always so contrived.
Yeah.
There's nothing, you really have to work to connect with people. Yeah. And it's noisy, and it's like all sorts of weird, nonsensical things going on. And after you've seen how, say, the Winter Tech Forum works, it's so disappointing to go to a conference where there's nothing, or actually there was the TEDx conference in Denver that I went to, and all of these interesting people were coming together, and their only focus was on, in fact, the reason to have the audience was so that the presentation looked good, and
cameras could capture all the people,
and they would do things to get the people wired. And also it gave the speaker a focus, but they didn't do anything with the people. I mean, yeah, they had a few gatherings and everything, but they could have done so much more to connect these people and all kinds
connect them and
create new
opportunities
ideas.
for creativity, like
Yeah.
we do at Winter Tech Forum.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. But it was their, I think what happened was they looked at that and they go, oh, that would be too much work because we have to control everything.
Yeah.
And they couldn't just let things happen. We don't know how to let things happen.
No.
It takes, I mean, the first few years that we did the Java Posse Roundup and things before that, I was sure that this year it's going to fall flat on its face because we don't control things. We don't have enough control.
Yeah. All right. Well,
we're out of time.
We're out of time.
Okay.
We have to control this.
Yeah. I think it has a natural stopping point.
Thanks for listening.
Yes. Thanks for listening.